I see one common drawing mistake over and over again. The origins are quite understandable. In fact, in some ways, they're quite natural to have when we start to draw. But there's no need to have this issue, and it's actually something that we can quite easily change. And we can then set ourselves up in our ongoing drawing process for continuous improvement and development. Because the solution to this problem is not just one that we apply once, but it lets us develop a drawing process that will continue to develop and improve my drawing. And it requires no experience and really not that much time or effort. You should see immediate improvement. The start of this problem, and it's very easy to understand, is that when I first start to draw, I think that the drawing process, I understand it to be, I have a photo that I'm going to copy now with my pen. And so my process is, well, I sit down, I look at my drawing, and I start to draw. I start to draw straight away because I can see my photo. I look at the photo, I draw a bit, I look at the photo, I draw a bit, I look at the photo, I draw a bit, and I try and copy it as closely as I can. Now, there are two flaws in this, and they're both addressed in the solution I'm going to give. The first is that I start drawing straight away. Because I understand my drawing process to be copying the photo, as soon as I've got the photo and I've sat down in front of my sheet of paper and I've got my pen in my hand, I can start to copy immediately. And the second problem with this is that I'm setting myself up for failure because I can't copy the photo. And it only takes a moment's thought to realize this. I look at my photo. It's produced from a photographic process, something that grabs all the detail that can be seen in a given moment under given conditions. And then to get it to draw from, I'm either looking at it directly as a digital copy or I've printed off a hard copy, which is now that photographic image translated onto paper with a 3 or 4 color printing process that completely smears the size of the reference totally in a combination of colored inks. How can I possibly copy that with a black fine liner pen? And as I try to, I set myself up to not do very well because the process I'm adopting quite instinctively is actually an inadequate one to let me develop my understanding of the drawing process and to let me improve easily. My solution is something I still use with every drawing I do, but it's something that a beginner can use on day one, and that's the beauty of this. It works wherever we're at. The solution is 3 questions. 3 questions I consider and how I answer those questions before I let the ink hit the paper for the final drawing. And the first question is, how am I wanting to improve on my photo? Because I'm not trying to copy it. The very first issue is a compositional one. Do I want to crop what I'm looking at in the photo? Any photo I've used on one of my drawing demo videos has been cropped. Even though I took the photo, when I look at it, there are always ways I can adjust the sides horizontally or vertically to create a more interesting composition, one that will focus the possible purposes I'm thinking of for my drawing. Here, I cropped the left and right sides variously to position this railing in a more dramatic position. Because it's always, this photo is a starting point. How can I improve on it? What challenges are there for me when I draw that will either challenge me as I try and copy what's happening, or more significantly, how can I improve weaknesses in my photo? Because just as drawing with a pen can have some challenges, so photography has its challenges as well. And when I print off a photo, I should never think my goal is to copy this, but my goal is to use this for my drawing to create the best drawing. So we've talked about cropping. An important issue to think about is values, the lights and darks. Am I happy with the play of lights and darks? Do I need to roll back some of the darks, or do I need to make some of the darks darker? Are there mid values which are all too similar and actually make it a bit hard to see what's happening? So should I darken some of them in my hatching? Are there parts where it's difficult to see exactly what's happening? And even if I can see what's happening, will it simply become more interesting to look at if I tweak the values in some way? Do I need to make adjustments? Do I need to leave some things out? Do I need to add some things? Do I need to move some things? Do I need to manipulate some things in some way? And the other important thing to look at is depth. This photo is 2 dimensions. It has no thickness, but the scene it's representing does. We travel along this raised boardwalk area, and then a track continues disappearing into the bright, harsh sunlight. But we can also see, particularly on this left side, that we go back into space quite some way, catching glimpses of trees at various depths as we do. So how am I going to improve my photo? Focuses my observation of my reference. This is not something that I'm going to impatiently start to copy. This is something that now I'm looking at very carefully and in some detail before I let the pen hit the paper and work out where are the weaknesses, where are the strengths, what can I bring out, what do I want to push back, what do I need to change? And that sets me up for the second question, because once in my mind I've worked out, or at least started to suggest, the ways I will change this image, the next question is, how do I want my finished drawing to look? I imagine how my drawing will look in my head. Now, my ability to do this will be a lot less in my first week of drawing than 5 years down the track or 20 years down the track. But what I do, and what I did, and I can remember doing with this scene, was I tried to picture this in my mind, and I came some way to actually doing that. I was looking at all of the elements that I saw here. Obviously, these rails, this raised boardwalk, these very closest trees, the next closest ones, and the trees that we could see disappearing into the distance, and the sense of distance, and also the light, the sense of moving from darkness into light. I thought of all these in my reference, and then I tried to imagine in general terms the marks I would use on the paper to create this scene. I literally tried to see this in my head in as much detail as possible. And so I'm thinking I'm going to darken this, and I'm going to darken this down here to make it stand out more. I'm going to increase the contrast between these closest leaves and what's behind. Make them darker, because that will make them feel closer, and I want these leaves to feel a lot closer than these trees, these closer things on the other side, because they are further away. I was trying to imagine how it would look, creating this shadow effect with the light breaking through in various parts. I was trying to imagine how much white I would need to leave up here and in this space here to give the sense of the denseness of the tree canopy becoming less and less as we moved in this direction further back. And in a general sense, I did imagine this. I had this in my mind, and that now set me up to draw it. And if you'd like to see how I plan and progress and finish a drawing such as this, I've added a 4-minute time lapse of the original drawing at the end. But before I did that, there was one final question I had to ask and answer. And for this one, I did need my pen. And that's, what marks do I think will capture what I've now envisaged from what I've imagined in my final drawing? And so now I spend 2 or 3 or 4 minutes playing around with not everything, but as many elements as I need to. The most challenging elements, the ones that I'm less decided of in my mind. So I might be wondering, how dark am I to go up here? And so I start just playing around with the marks I think I'm going to use. And I'm particularly paying attention to silhouette edges. And I'm just trying to work out, is this going to work? How will this look? I might be looking here and thinking, how dark do I want to go? How to draw this. If I'm doing cross-hatching rather than hatching, I may want to explore what pattern is going to work best. What angle to place the second layer of hatching lines at over the first. I may be thinking I want to create a bit more of a rounded edge here from where it's slightly weathered, and so I explore how I might combine hatching to create a slightly rounded edge, or do I want to have a hard edge by drawing a line in? So I'm playing around with my marks to explore how different effects can be created, and then I decide before I start my drawing what I'm doing. This also serves to warm up my hand-eye coordination, and I start to get confidence with my mark making before I draw my first marks. The first marks we draw are often the weakest, but unfortunately they often need to be in a fairly central, focused part of our drawing. So this lets me feel nice and loose and comfortable when I start those first lines. I might also explore not just the marks I'm going to use, but the pens I'm going to use as part of my trying to create certain effects through my mark making. In other words, anything that I'm a little unsure about, I'll play around with on a scrap of paper before I start my drawing. And if anything here doesn't work out, I've got time to go back to the drawing board and work out a different way, a different approach that might be more successful. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Here's that 4-minute time lapse of this scene being drawn that I mentioned earlier. But it really is as simple as that. The problem is we rush to draw straight away thinking that we're doing a copy of our photo instead of understanding that our photo is a starting point, that we can improve on the photo, both on the weaknesses of any photo, but also simply to add the strengths of our imagination for the scene. And having done that, we then can visualize what our drawing is going to look like in the actual marks that we use, and then we can experiment with those marks to see, do they create the effects? Do they have the impact? Do they have the result that we're after? And we can then make changes if we need to, or change our plans for the photos if we can't find a solution to create the effect that we were visualizing in our head. All of which lead together to a far stronger, more effective drawing and a far deeper learning experience. And this is very important when we draw. And this is why our development in drawing, our development of understanding of the drawing process, and our ability to improve increases rapidly, exponentially, because the process that we're using to draw almost in itself teaches us to improve and pushes us to improve all the time. So why not give this process a go if it's not one that you've used before? Just a few minutes may change your drawing forever. But in the end, whatever you draw, however you draw it, whatever process or aim you have or don't have, make sure you have fun, because that in the end, I think, fuels whatever it is we're doing. So I'll leave you just to watch the last couple of minutes of this in peace, and I'll see you next time. Bye.